He talks about that when one tribe has it, when one family has it, you cannot give it to another tribe. You can't sell it to another tribe. It's supposed to stay as an inheritance for that family so that there's always something for that family to have, as opposed to being penniless and not having anything. And so there's this law of inheritance that's playing into this. And so God had outlined that if you sold something, there was always a way to get it back. And there would not be a way to be out of your inheritance forever. And folks, the laws were put in place by God to protect family heritage. Imagine that God cares that much about our family heritage. He did for the Israelites, and He does for us as well. And interestingly, archaeology supports this because they have multiple land records from the Canaanites during this time period, but they have no records, or almost no records, of Israelites doing this at this point in time. Fascinating, isn't it, when archaeology supports what we see in Scripture? When we see that God says, hey, don't do this, and then archaeologists are like, why didn't they do that? Because the Canaanites did it, all the nations around them were doing it, but we can't find this in the Israelite archaeology. Well, imagine that. It's because God told them not to do it. And it's interesting to me also that the northern kingdoms still participated in this. However, we do have records of the kings and the rulers abusing this privilege, and that's where Isaiah speaks out on this. Micah speaks out on this, where people had taken land that wasn't theirs and had abused this privilege. But God is also showing us here how far Ahab started looking like the culture around him. So that's a whole lot of buildup about Ahab coveting somebody else's stuff. But Ahab was coveting this vineyard. And what's he go and do? Why do we know that he's coveting? Because he goes home, and it says he's vexed, he's perturbed. Folks, a common lie of Satan to us is that if we just had X, whatever it is, we would be happy. You won't be happy until you get it. And we start to crave and we yearn it. So often we fall into that lie. Christians are just as susceptible to this as anyone else. Ahab is so obsessed with this that he doesn't even want to eat. It says he turns his face away. In some versions, I think it says he wraps his head in like a blanket. It reminds me of toddlers. When my kids were toddlers, and I would tell them no, they would often, software update. They would often go to their room and throw a blanket over their head and pout. Ahab's doing the same thing. And we might look at that and we might say, we don't do that kind of stuff. But we do sulk. We do go and do this kind of stuff. But folks, we need to remember this one thing that I think we sometimes forget. Coveting is a sin. We don't always look at it that way. We don't always look at it, if I only had X, I'd be happy, as being a sin. We just want it, and it's okay, right? That we want stuff. I just want to remind you folks that it has its own commandment. It's the 10th commandment. And just because it's the last commandment doesn't mean it doesn't hold as much weight as the other commandments. Exodus 20, it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his male servant, his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything else that is your neighbor's. Well, we might say we don't covet our neighbor's oxes or donkeys, but I bet you sometimes we do say, that car looks nice, I wish I had something like that. If I had that, that would really make me happy. Or we look at their nice house, and we say, if only our house was like that, we'd be happier. Our family would be happier. Or we look at so-and-so's marriage, and we say, if only our marriage could look as good as their marriage, I'd be happier.